Inclusive teaching, supporting all students in the college classroom. Why does inclusive teaching matter?
The question about if inclusive teaching matters is really a tough one. I understand where the question is coming from, but I think there's actually a different question that probably needs to be asked that is much more important. Because if we're going to ask why inclusion matters, it means that there is, at some point in our history, whether it's in the classroom, in our neighborhood or communities, we need to be convinced that there are people who don't look like us, act like us, think like us, need to be a part of this process somehow. It's not the default that they are seen as equally capable or equally have equal access to the same resources we have. So even the fact that that question needs to be asked, I think, is indicative of maybe a deeper underlying issue that we've had historically and I would argue globally, of the us versus them mentality, right? Who's the us and who's the them? So the fact that we have to have a movement and a classroom and grants that force people to think about including, the question really is, well, why weren't we thinking about including in the first place, right? And if you can get at that reason, I think that's almost a better and more powerful question to be addressed. I think what we struggle with, not just in the classroom, but honestly, I would argue in America at large, is trying to figure out who we consider equal to us in terms of their membership in this broader social in-group. And to me, that has just replicated itself in the classroom. I was born and raised in the Caribbean, and I could argue that in a semi-international context, you are always addressing this issue of who's going to be considered, whether it's part of the classroom, part of the university, part of the country, part of the neighborhood. So inclusion as a question really gets down to really how you view people who are different to yourself.
Inclusive teaching is a moral imperative. One of the early threads of the inclusive teaching literature comes out of women's studies with the Chile climate papers in the 80s. And those papers documented a lot of the micro inequities that were happening in the classroom at that time, as well as big offenses that would cause indignation and would actually amount to sexual harassment in the classroom by today's standards. But going beyond the indignation, today we have, after decades of research, we have full documentation that inclusive teaching matters in the sense that if the climate is not hospitable for students, that can impact learning and performance, critical thinking, preparation for a career, retention, and graduation.
In order for learning to take place, there has to be a high trust and low stress environment. So that climate becomes very important in order that students are positioned to do their best learning, particularly for diverse students who may feel marginalized and not included in the dominant cultural ways of interacting and those dominant narratives. And it's incumbent upon the instructor to really create that environment, to create a community of learners where everyone feels that they are intellectually safe to make mistakes, to learn from each other.